Hey, the Dapper Dinosaur here. I'm taking a look at a video from Genesis Apologetics called Debunking Transitional Fossils, Archaeopteryx and Tiktalik. So, let's see whether or not they can actually debunk transitional fossils.
In both of these textbooks, they showed pictures of the Archaeopteryx fossil, supposedly half dinosaur and half bird.
No.
Archaeopteryx is not a half dinosaur. It's all dinosaur and not a bird at all. It is closely related to true birds, which is why it has so many avian features.
Yeah, it was discovered in 1861. Alan Fiducia, a paleontologist who led studies in the origins of birds, said this back in 1993. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird. No amount of paleobabble is going to change that.
Alan Fiducia is a paleoornithologist at the University of North Carolina. Unfortunately for him, virtually all of his ideas about the origins of birds from crocodile-line ancestors have been demolished in the last few decades. He holds to his beliefs despite the evidence, not because of it. Kind of like creationists, so I get why you'd cite him. The fact is that no, Archaeopteryx wasn't a perching bird. For one thing, it lacks the diagnostic criteria to be a bird. For example, it lacks a keeled sternum. Its tarsal bones are not fused to the tibia. Its metatarsals are still separate unfused bone, etc. As for perching, when Dr. Fiducia made this statement, it was a reasonable inference. But further fossils and studies have shown that the apparently backwards-pointing hallux of Archaeopteryx was a taphonomic artifact, and that in life this toe was a dewclaw similar to that in other more basal theropods, like T-Rex, Allosaurus, or Ceratosaurus.
Since making that statement, there has been a constant battle in the evolutionary camp about whether Archaeopteryx should be even considered an ancestor to birds, and many are making the case that it should be thrown out of the evolutionary lineup, going from being a bird to a dinosaur and then back to a bird.
No.
While its status as a bird was debated for a while, it's pretty clear now that it's not a bird, but it was always a dinosaur. Because new clades always erupt from within ancestral clades, a dinosaur that has evolved into a bird doesn't stop being a dinosaur, not any more than it stops being a vertebrate. Because Archaeopteryx is so close to birds morphologically, it is placed as basal to birds within Humaniraptora.
Archaeopteryx was even further disqualified as an evolutionary ancestor for birds when scientists found what appears to be a crow-sized bird and extinct four-winged birds in rock layers designated to be below those containing Archaeopteryx.
Since the fossil you showed is of the four-winged crow-sized, and probably crow-colored, Microraptor, I'll assume that your talk about a crow-sized bird and a four-winged bird are both about Microraptor. First, that's not a bird. Microraptor was a dromaeosaur, just like Velociraptor, Utahraptor, or Dakotaraptor. The fact that this was a small and gliding member of this family doesn't make it a bird. As far as when the earliest bird appeared, it rather depends on how we define bird, which has become increasingly difficult. Aviale is the group of dinosaurs closer to birds than Deinonychus. If you count this as birds, then sure, Archaeopteryx is a bird and Microraptor isn't. I prefer to define aves as a crown group starting with the common ancestor of all extant birds. So, say the most recent common ancestor of ospreys and ostriches. By this definition, birds probably don't appear until a bit into the early Cretaceous. But this isn't very important. The fact that Archaeopteryx existed 150 million years ago, when there were already even more bird-like animals earlier than that, doesn't make it not a transitional form. A transitional form is a form that has a mix of primitive and derived characters, being morphologically intermediate between the ancestral form and later more derived forms. Archaeopteryx is unarguably a morphological intermediate between the most basal maniraptors, like the dromaeosaurs, and more derived maniraptors, like modern birds. The strength of transitional fossils as evidence of evolution is not that they show us the very species which are ancestral to various modern, or even later but extinct, groups. The strength is that these are novel predictions based on evolutionary theory. If evolution is true, we expect to see transitional forms with these intermediate morphologies. If evolution were not true, there is no reason to expect to see any particular transition.
Talk about throwing a wild pitch.
Wild pitches happen often in the game of evolution, like the fossil called Tiktalik. It quickly became the missing link between fish and four-legged creatures that first walked on land.
Missing link is a terrible term, and no one should use it. The big problem is that it implies 1, that the form in question is missing, and 2, that it is the direct ancestor to some group for which it is the link. Because of the nature of the fossil record and our method of conducting phylogenetic analysis, we will never recover any fossil form as directly ancestral to any other form, living or dead. Tiktalik is definitely intermediary between tetrapods and earlier sarcopterygian fish, such as Eusthenopteron.
Oh yeah, I heard of that. It was kind of the star of transitional fossils.
But then, in 2010, scientists announced in the journal Nature that they had found footprints of a four-legged land creature in Poland that are supposedly 10 million years older than Tiktalik. So there goes Tiktalik as a clear transitional fossil, and yet, here it is, still in our textbook.
This is just a rehash of your objection to Archaeopteryx. That it coexisted with animals closer to modern tetrapods than it was, doesn't make it not a transitional form. Relatively primitive forms can exist with more derived forms. Look at the apes. The lesser apes, such as gibbons, are very similar in overall size and shape to other Old World monkeys. The great apes are clearly more derived, with different proportions, larger brains, better terrestrial locomotion, etc. And when we come to humans, we see huge amounts of derivation. Humans look much less like the basal Old World monkeys than gibbons, but that's okay. Gibbons, chimps, gorillas, and humans all manage to stay around, simply because each one remains well adapted to its habitat. If forms like Tiktalik remain well adapted to their environment, there's no reason for them to go extinct. And they still illustrate the anatomy of the transition from fully aquatic to amphibious animals in the tetrapod line. Further, Tiktalik was predicted explicitly by Neil Shubin, who then went to the predicted place and found the thing. Tell you what, let me know when creationists make a prediction about a fossil form that is not what evolution would predict, and then go find the thing. When you do that, you'll at least have half a leg to stand on compared to actual science.
Like I said, there should be millions of transitional fossils. So if evolutionary theory can only suggest a few, and those few have major problems, it discredits the theory.
Wikipedia lists 179 fossil genera that are in the category of transitional fossils, but the fact is that those are only the particularly prominent ones. There are dozens of just dinosaur transitional forms that I can think of off the top of my head, and the situation is similar with other groups. We are saturated in transitional forms in the fossil record. Darwin's prediction that we should find transitional forms has been supremely fulfilled by now. And this is a prediction that no one who accepted special creation ever made. Sure, you can just say that God happened to create animals that looked transitional, but creationism never predicted it. And that's how science figures out which of competing ideas is more likely to be right. The idea that can predict future data, even about the past, is the idea to be accepted. The one that can only offer post hoc rationalizations for future data is worthless. Special creation of organisms is worthless, because it provides no predictions at odds with evolutionary theory that have ever been fulfilled. Well, that's it for now. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you hated this video, then let me know why, and still subscribe. In terms of channel news, I'm planning to host a debate after show for Eric Viertaler's debate with Kent Hovind on September 25th. And Eric, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Well, that's all for now. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.